All right, so we are now recording, and hopefully everybody can see my desktop. Well, this is the December meeting of the Omaha 365 user group, and I just have a couple announcements. First of all, we are recording this meeting, and we record as many as we can. And so if you want to see a recording of that, we have our YouTube channel. If you go to, we have a shortcut there. So if you go to lnk.omaha365.org/YouTube, it'll take you right to our YouTube channel. Also, any future presentation or any future events, announcements or something like that is always at our website, and that's at Omaha365.org. And that's our website. And of course, we're always looking for speakers. We have been trying, we want to fill our 21 schedule, but because we really don't know when we're going to start meeting in person again. So we are looking for speakers. And so anybody attending this meeting currently, if you would like to present, and specifically companies local to Omaha, we're always interested in finding out how our local companies are using SharePoint and the whole Microsoft 365 tool set in their business. And if you've developed custom applications, or you just had some neat functionality that you think other people might benefit from, or if there's a particular third-party tool that you're using within your environment and you think that other people might benefit from it, we can discuss that too. We're all, this is a Microsoft user group, and so we're always trying to find better ways of using what they provide. And so we'd love to see local people, local attendees present what their companies are doing, because most everybody knows about, Omaha is not that big of a city that we don't know what your company already does. If somebody says Gavilon, most people know what Gavilon does. Or if somebody says Blue Cross Blue Shield or OPPD or something like that, we know what kind of business it is, and it would be kind of nice to see how everybody uses SharePoint. So there's a form on the website that says, I would like to speak. Fill it out, and I'll contact you, and we'll get you set up. Without further ado, I want to thank Emily for volunteering to present. Emily presented at our conference this year, and she graciously accepted another invitation to present at our actual user group meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to her. There she is. And I'm going to just go ahead and let you take over the presentation. Thanks,
Perfect.
Emily.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who is joining today. I do have our chat popped up right behind my slides. So as we go throughout today, please don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll try to take pauses to pop in and make sure we answer those as well. So today we'll be talking about embedding user experience in your out-of-the-box solutions. Again, my name is Emily Mancini. I am an architect at Sympraxis Consulting. I am an information architect and specialize in user experience. I'm master certified by the Nielsen Norman Group, who is the world leader in user research. So you'll hear me referencing them a lot throughout this talk. I was also formerly a Microsoft 365 platform owner and trainer at a company as a solo resource. So I have a lot of appreciation for what you are going through as business owners as well. As we go through our presentation today, we'll be talking about how to identify content and needs, say architecture, navigation, page layout, and using web parts, all with that user-centric approach. But before I dive in, I would love to hear a little bit more about who we have with us today and what you're working on. So I'm curious who's just starting with Microsoft 365, maybe who's been using it for a while and you're moving from classic to modern, maybe people who are responsible for Microsoft 365, or if your communications or marketing, any teams larger than one. So feel free to put a little bit about yourself in the chats.
And I think we have the ability also to unmute your microphone if you want to just share a little bit.
Yeah, for anyone not shy, please welcome you too.
A lot of shy people.
Yeah, no worries. We'll keep on going, and as your questions come up throughout, no problem at all. Let's dive into them then. So to start off in our whole conversation about embedding user experience and talking about identifying content and needs, I want to start out talking about before we build our site and any of our solutions, we need to think about who is coming to our site and why. What do they need to do? What are they trying to accomplish? Nielsen Norman Group did a study on the information architecture of intranets, and they found that 86% of new intranets were task-based, meaning organized by task or topic. So it's independent of the department necessarily that supports a structure. And they found that these task-based structures often better withstand organizational change than intranets that are organized by department. So we're going to be talking a lot today about that task-based focus of how you can structure your intranet and all the different user experience principles you can apply with your out-of-the-box web parts and page layouts to make it user-focused. So we're going to ask, what is task-based exactly? Let's take a look first at an organization-based structure. So let's pretend we are working with a procurement department, and this is our procurement site. Then looking across our top tier, we have our different groups. And then below those groups are actually the things that I probably need to access as an end user. If we switch this to a task-based structure, you'll see the sub-departments within the group who is responsible for each of these items are removed. Putting these tasks front and center means me as an end user, I'm getting the answer of what supports what I need to do without needing that institutional knowledge at my organization of who's responsible for each of these actions that I need to do. Often, many people think if we build a great intranet, the end users will come to read news, peruse photos, and engage in content. So we build our intranets based off of what leaders are asking for. Or sometimes maybe it's a vague need to improve communications without an exact plan of how we want to accomplish that or what information people are seeking. Even worse, maybe you were tasked with an intranet redesign to make it pop. What this all fails to consider is what are your colleagues trying to get done in their day and how can the intranet help them accomplish those tasks? So famous Field of Dreams quote slightly altered, if you build it, they will come. Not totally true for your intranets. What we need to do is think about who's coming to our intranet and support those top tasks that they need to do. So how do we find out that information of what they're trying to do? I recommend you first start with developing personas to help include those end users in your designs. So to better understand your end users, you need to have conversations with them to understand their perspectives. User experience is all about having sympathy for your end users and understanding their goals. These personas should have attitudinal, behavioral, and contextual data that can provide a well-rounded set of considerations to guide your decision making. We're moving away from this box checking of features and requirements, and instead we're focusing on the experience of the end user, what it's actually like to be them. We're looking for that deeper understanding we can only gain from involving them, to hear directly from them what their experiences are, their motivations and goals. I build personas for every single site that I build, with or without customizations, because it's really important, again, that I understand what they are trying to accomplish. While we're developing these personas, you do need to be really targeted in your creation, as overgeneralization won't help you prioritizing decisions later. This is our first step of some qualitative research. And I'll talk about how each layer builds on top of each other to help focus your intranet design. And these personas help us weigh competing factors and prioritize the user needs. I recommend including stakeholders in this portion of the process because you can use these personas as an artifact to reflect the themes from your conversations you had previously with all of the end users. So this is kind of generating that problem statement for your stakeholders to understand what we're trying to solve for with this build. It gives you the opportunity to align on the problem statement really early on in your project process. Now, making these user stories, personas, sometimes when I talk with people, they say, well, we're already doing all these other steps. This is a hard and heavy lift. It's just a reframe of documenting these conversations that you have. And I have a great tip for easy, beautiful documentation of these personas. Microsoft Whiteboard actually has a persona template. So you can download Microsoft Whiteboard for free from the Microsoft Store. And Hugo Bernier recently just showed this to me, and it's my new favorite trick for making these personas quickly in a scalable and beautiful way. So I'm in Microsoft Whiteboard now, and I'm just going down to the bottom to Insert Menu, and you'll see I can choose Template. And Personas is all the way at the bottom, so you may not have seen this before. So if you scroll all the way down, there we have our persona builder. So we have that wonderful layout so we can actually just start popping in the different information about them in our demographics, goals, known habits, and pain points. It's really important to include things like technical capability at this stage as well, because depending on your solution and how complex it is to learn, that might have a really big impact in your change management. So knowing where your variety of users are starting from can really set you up for success as you're planning your project timelines. Now, after we create those personas, we know who is coming to our sites. We also want to develop that into a user needs statement and take it another step further. A user needs statement is an actionable problem statement summarizing who a particular user is, their needs, and why that's important to the user. This is where it's helping you outline the goals of the personas into a feature list. These user stories serve as your North Star as you focus on what is a critical need. They also serve as questions for task-based testing later on and a way to showcase success to project stakeholders. So if we are using this as our list of feature requirements, and then at the end, my stakeholders say, how did that launch go? And I did testing based off of these statements, I can say, well, we set out to meet all of these needs, and here's our quantitative data of how our needs were met by the site. Communication can be a really soft topic, so developing these statements helps make some more tangible benchmarking and items that off of. So let's take a look at a user needs statement. We're going to continue with our procurement example. I am a purchaser and I need to hire a consultant. So, and my goal is to hire a consultant maybe to help with an intranet migration project. Make sure these stories, again, stay rooted in your UX data. Otherwise, you may believe in these stories more than your users and end up with products that satisfy imaginary needs. This is also a pretty common challenge of starting out with technology first, right? Where if we're focusing on the features first, we can advertise all these awesome things that Microsoft made, but they may not directly align to a problem that the business is having. And at the end of the day, all of this technology is best to use if it's solving an existing business problem. Create these user stories at the beginning of your project to create alignment on what you're trying to accomplish in the site build. This becomes your true north throughout the project. You can use it to measure, again, how successful the site build was, determine homepage content priorities, and use it to generate tasks to be completed in that user testing. So let's look at a couple more. When you're outlining these top tasks, don't forget to include varying audiences like managers, leadership, and the content owners themselves. Supporting your content owners' needs ensures they have no friction updating the site, and it stays a valuable resource for the organization. These are now the tasks our end users need to accomplish. Earlier, I mentioned a task-based structure. So if my end users, let's say a purchaser, lands on this site and cannot find instructions or guidance on how to hire consultants, they will end up resorting to email or a Teams chat. I often see communication site homepages grouped by templates, forms, policies. What if I don't know which content bucket my task falls into? As an end user, I am more interested in the actions I can take on the site, not the format of the content you are sharing with me. So for us to be thinking about embedding a good user experience in our out-of-the-box solutions, it has to start with a good understanding of the end user before you can actually provide them with these awesome solutions. You can also take these user needs a step further and align to company goals to start creating documentation on how Microsoft 365 is actually supporting these initiatives. And this can be something that helps you prioritize projects across departments later on. So now we know what everybody needs for our audience of this site, which serves as our goals alignment. We need to find the content to support those needs. Content review, again, it's always about that end user. So as we're going through our content evaluation, we have a couple things we want to think about. The first is accuracy. Relevant. Is this the most recent information? You want to think about your freshness of that content, similar to accuracy, but when was this content created? Is this so old that it doesn't necessarily add value to having it in our intranet? Maybe that's not where we're going to spend a lot of our time building out our sites. We want to focus on the uniqueness. In our modern SharePoint world, does this same or similar content exist elsewhere on the internet, or is it housed in another enterprise app? If that content owner should have it because you're not responsible for it, it's just a useful resource you want to reference, you should not be duplicating it. You should just be surfacing it. So we want to make sure that as we're making all of our different connections, we're not creating silo copies. We always want to have one source of truth, and then we're presenting all of those sources of truth where relevant. This also supports our end user so they don't have to wade through conflicting information in the intranet. We want to focus on that importance to employee. Is there a need for it? Does it impact the employee's work or job satisfaction, right? We're talking about their top tasks. How does this help them get their job done? And then we have importance to employer. What does management want employees to have for information? I do have this intentionally listed as last. Too often I see sites built with importance to employer as number one and then gaining no traction. And that's because they're coming from a perspective of communicating out versus supporting your end users and drawing them in. So while there is absolutely value and a need for leadership to have things to communicate out, that can't be the majority of the drive of the internet. It really is that task focus. It's a lot easier to convince your colleagues to have a change in behavior if there's something in it for them and you're helping them get their jobs done faster versus asking them to add another step to their day and another additional thing to do. So now that we've talked a little bit about identifying our content and needs of our users to make sure everything we're building is focused on supporting them in their top tasks, let's talk about what that actually looks like within SharePoint. So for those of you who are already working in the modern world, I'm going to go over this a little quickly. For those of you who are new to it, this is for you. If you have any additional questions, because I go over it fast, please don't hesitate to speak up in the chat, and I'm happy to slow down. But in the modern SharePoint world, it's flat. We no longer have subsites. They caused a lot of challenges previously with broken links. So what we have now is standalone site collections, and we can join them together by a hub site. So what does that actually look like? Let's pretend these dark purple ones are our hub sites, and these light purple ones are our standalone site collections that have been associated to a hub. These green lines are just the connection to them. They're not actually subsites like they were previously. They're standalone, so it's just a link. So at our fake company, Kintoso Travel or Kintoso Procurement, they did an evaluation of the departments and they decided procurement is actually more closely tied to operations. So we need to change the intranet to reflect this. In the modern world, I just changed the hub site association. It does not impact the site architecture since it's a standalone site collection. So when I associate this site to a new hub, I don't have to worry about URL changes, no more broken links. There's a lot better governance that I have available to me, as I can have these sites inherit permissions. It automatically inherits the theme and navigation of the hub. And then we also have the same search scope within our hubs. So speaking of navigation, right now, one of our challenges is we currently have no hubs of hubs. They mentioned associated hubs is coming end of year. Formerly, it was this summer, so let's hope it isn't pushed again. For right now, I don't have any out-of-the-box options to show you, though they did also announce at Ignite that the SharePoint app bar is coming, which will give us global navigation. Your navigation will be consistent across all site collections based off your SharePoint home site. For now, though, staying in our vein of what we have available today out of the box, the first box that I am highlighting up here is your hub navigation. Then we have a second tier of navigation on this site. This is your site navigation. So as of today, those are your only two items that you have. I mentioned the SharePoint app bar that's coming soon, so let's take a look at it. We can see here on the left, this is that home site navigation appearing. We are also going to see any of your frequent sites you went to and bookmarked, a roll up of the news, and all of your files in one spot. I'm incredibly excited for this. I think it's going to solve a lot of challenges that people have today with having these standalone hubs and figuring out navigation. Since those features aren't available just yet, let's focus on these current navigation layouts. These options are both available for hubs and the hub sites and sites. So our first one is a mega menu. So we can see here we have a tier 1 label of Contoso brand, a tier 2 label of brand style, collateral, editorial, and then a tier 3, which is all of our actual links. We also have the ability to choose a cascading menu. So in this one, we just have a tier 1 label with tier 2 links. We didn't have additional groupings that we needed. Now, when you're planning things like your navigation, let's return our focus to our end user and creating that great experience for them using your navigation. So there's this idea around information foraging and how it relates to animal foraging. So the concept is when an animal wants to find food, they're focused on spending the lowest amount of calories possible to find that food. I always like to imagine truffle pigs in this example looking for truffles. So they want to find those truffles as fast as possible without spending too much energy to do it. Similarly, your colleagues want to expend the least amount of energy to find the content they need to get their job done. We're all very busy and have competing priorities. So focus on decreasing that interaction cost for your colleagues to support that information foraging. The way we do that is by providing what is called a strong information scent. The information scent lets the end user know how likely it is that resource that they want to click on or engage with is going to serve their needs. So let's take an example of how a mega menu could provide a stronger information scent with less effort by the end user when there's multiple categories. So looking at our Contoso travel, we can see we have destinations in North America and South America. I have to go look at them separately because it's a cascading menu. But if I want someone to be able to see all of the places that they can go in one view, that could provide a less friction in their experience, maybe deciding where they want to travel to by putting it in that one mega menu. So again, we have that stronger information scent of where they can go because we're seeing them all together. We're increasing that transparency of what falls under North America and South America for our destinations. Now, when we're looking at our navigation, so we just saw the way we had it organized by destinations and travel assistance. The default SharePoint navigation that will come is documents, right? Pages, site contents. No one cares what it is, right? It's more important to know where I am and what I can do. They want to have those top tasks in their navigation. So one of the first things we want to do in that navigation is keep our link behavior consistent. When I talked through the mega menu and the cascading menu, I was calling out label, label, link for the mega menu and label, link for the cascading menu. You want to be consistent. So if you're using your cascading menu, you want all tier 1 to either be all links or all labels. So that way it's predictable for someone to understand what they can click on versus what they can't. Align the navigation to those top tasks you developed in your user needs statements. Not every single thing needs to be in that top navigation. It will actually increase the cognitive load of your end users. You want to make sure that you're using clear front-loaded labels for your navigation, because as we're scanning on the web, we're actually reading only 22 to 28% of what's on the pages. And when you're looking at those shorter micro copy of link labels and things like that, you're actually reading the first couple of words. So for example, if I'm on the HR site, I don't want every link to be HR benefits, HR learning. I'm already on the HR site and I know that. You're adding additional information for me to mentally sort through that I actually don't need. And then, of course, I keep mentioning that user testing. We won't have a lot of time to go through that today, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you want any guidance or recommendations or resources for user testing. It's really important at the end of all of this to take those user needs statements and measure against them in the end. So for example, to measure findability on our site, we may say something like, find the process for hiring external consultants and see if the menu we designed for that procurement site is intuitive. I mentioned you don't want to put absolutely everything in the top nav, and that's due to the Hick-Hyman law that says it will take significantly more time to decide what you want to click on depending on the number of options you have. So if you're anything like me, if you're going to Amazon.com, you're never using their menus. They're gigantic. You're probably using the search. That helps with finding an exact thing I need, but it doesn't help with the discoverability of I don't know that something exists or if it exists and I want to explore that procurement site. So your navigation does matter even if search is becoming incredibly powerful. Some of the ways that you can develop the categories for this navigation is to do a couple of card sorting activities. I recommend first doing open card sorting with your core team to determine those categories. So what I have on this screen, all of these light blue boxes are pages that we're making on our site. These dark blue boxes are the categories that I'm going to put them under, that tier 1 label in my navigation. So with my core team, I'm giving them a stack of blank cards or Post-its, stack of the pages and saying, group these into meaningful groups and give them labels. What they came up with was about functions, locations, and help. So now what I want to do is take this another step further and outside of my core team with a larger audience. If you're in a big organization, up to 15 gives you statistically relevant results. And I want to test these categories that my core team came up with. So this is now closed card sorting, and that's where I'm giving them the labels and I'm asking my audience which of these pages fall under these labels. So I did a test with the results I got. And then I did a test with another group and you'll see security and context were swapped. So this helped me uncover some issues that we want to talk about with the team. And I highly recommend interviewing them, asking them a little bit more about why you put it under this item or what you expected to find in this area. The whole point of doing our testing now is to find these issues early on before we launch so we can iterate and make those improvements, keeping that end user front of mind because they're not the subject matter experts that you are in procurement, so they may not know and find these as intuitive, for example. You can also go another step further with tree testing. I keep mentioning task-based questions, so I'm going to go over this lightning quick. But essentially, a tree test evaluates your hierarchical category structure by having users find the locations in the tree where specific tasks can be completed. So think of this as the procurement site, this procurement tier as our communication site. And then the second tier is our tier 1 navigation labels, and then the light purple ones as our actual pages. So we have 2 pages for purchasing and improving, which link 2 pages about the process. So we're using this as a follow-up to evaluate if all of those are closed. I'm saying to someone, how do I hire an external consultant? And ideally, they're going to go see procuring goods and services, and they may or may not find purchasing as a very clear label. All of this, again, can be conducted well in advance of designing your page layouts or navigation menus. You can even build it right on your site. Just be sure not to include even that like fake filler content with stock images, because it can be really distracting. When you have filler content, this is considered more of like a medium to high fidelity wireframe. And when you're testing this navigation, people might focus more on the images and the lorem ipsum text clicking on these labels. So I actually recommend blank pages when you're doing this tier of testing. Another thing to think about as you're creating this navigation is about your better link labels, especially if in your tree testing you found some confusion. So let's talk about how we ensure our titles are intuitive for our whole audience. We want to make sure that they're specific. No more learn here, click here. We also want to avoid jargon or cute puns. Put those on your page. We need to make sure they can get to your page first, and common familiar language is critical in supporting that. We want to make sure our links are sincere. We are making a promise to someone. So if I'm saying this link is going to deliver you to training content specific to procurement, I better not drop you on the procurement landing page. I'm sorry, and not the actual training itself. If it's restricted access, we also want to audience target or put a little icon there so we can set expectations that they don't have access to it. You want to make sure that your links are also substantial. So as people are scanning the web, this link needs to stand alone as a label. That's why learn more and click here can be challenging, especially for people using things like screen readers. So if I read this link alone, is that enough information for me to make a decision? Does it give me that strong information sent? Now, I know I just asked you to do a lot of different things, but I'm also asking you to keep it short. Only have it be long enough to meet the above 3 goals. But do know that the interaction cost at this stage is actually lower to read another couple words before deciding if I go to than it is to be navigating back and forth between pages. That actually frustrates your end users a lot more. One of the things that launched last week, now that we're talking about our top navigation, is our site header. So let's take a peek at what is up there as well. So we can go to the gear and then change the look. You'll see I'm now navigating to header. As we can make this small, minimal header. I know a lot of people were asking for. Compact and standard were the ones we already had. And then now we have this addition of an extended header. This is another opportunity to provide expectations on your site, especially if you have a rich image to support what this site is about. So this is our travel site. A picture of the globe up at the top can give a strong information sent to our end users of what this whole section is about. You can change that text alignment, but you will notice they don't have that same overlay as they do on the pages just yet. So do be aware of how your text can disappear and the accessibility of all these wonderful labels as you're designing your different themes and headers. You're spending all this time and thought on these words to make it intuitive. Make sure that these are all legible to actually read. So now we have talked about identifying our content, our site architecture and navigation. Let's talk a little bit about our page layout. Before we dive into specifics, I want to highlight one of my favorite places for inspiration, which is the lookbook. You can use the lookbook and actually install in your dev tenant or even in your own site collection to play around with these sites. My favorite thing about it is that it will give you a combination of different web parts in context on the page. And then you can actually go through and see the different web parts that they used and click to the training for it. So if you find yourself getting stumped on all the different ways you can lay out your pages, strongly, strongly recommend spending some time on the lookbook. So now that we're talking about pages, one of the top things we want to do when we're planning our pages is think about the titles of them and our search results. That title that you're making in your URL actually is an additional way to improve your findability. So if on every single department site, you're naming a page help or our team, that's actually going to make the search results for the end users a little bit more cluttered and not specific enough. Think of labeling your page first, human resources help, so it's in the URL, and then renaming your page to just help. So you're getting the best of both worlds, improving that search findability to support your end users, but then reducing the cognitive load on the pages themselves in the titles. Another way to reduce the cognitive load for your end users is to develop guidance for consistency in page layout. Create standard locations for the same information so they're not relearning how to consume content each time they go to a site. You can also do things like centralize graphics and images and agree as an organization what you want those to look like and upload them into org assets. You'll want to provide some guidance on your column options and backgrounds and the best ways to use them, again, so that structure is consistent for all the different groups. As you're developing that guidance, of course, test that with your end users to make sure that the design works for everyone. So let's say we've just made a page. I'm going to show you quickly how you can turn these pages into a template. These page templates are specific to each site collection, so you'll need to use a third-party migration tool or recreate these pages in each site collection. I'll also touch really quickly on some dev options. But essentially what you do is you make your page, and then that little drop down in the top left, instead of hitting publish, I hit save page as a template. And now that's always available for me in my site pages templates folder. So now when I want to use these different page templates, what I can do is from the home page, go to new, and let's just do a news post as an example. You'll see there is that page template for news that I just made, and I can even see it on the right what it will look like. So this will help support your end users and your different content owners, all of their content structured consistently across sites. I've seen a lot of people also put the actual instructions of how to use the templates in the page themselves, which is really handy. So I promised this was all an out-of-the-box solution, so I'm going to spend very brief amount of time on this slide, but essentially, as I mentioned, since the page templates don't go across site collections, you do need to use a third-party tool or a little bit of code to be able to bring them across site collections. Site Designs doesn't yet do page layouts, but the PNP provisioning templates do. You do need to have some comfort with XML and PowerShell to be able to apply that. As a non-dev, I'm finding it dangerously exciting to play with these, and it is pretty intuitive. So don't be too afraid to dive into it if you're a non-dev yourself. I think there's a lot there that could provide a lot of value for you. I also mentioned organizational assets. So this is the idea of creating one central image library that goes across all of these different standalone site collections. This is one line of PowerShell. And what it does is now in every different site, I can see this Your Organization button. I can go to a library of images that are shared. What's nice about this is you're creating consistency in the look and feel of these sites. There is the aesthetic usability principle, which says the prettier something is, the more we as humans are useful. So if your marketing communications team has a lot of great imagery that they want you to use, this is a great way to put it in one spot. Even better for that marketing communications team, if they're going through a rebrand, all they have to do in their document library is keep the, let's say, logo file name the same, upload it, and replace their old logos with their new ones, and it will automatically update across all the different site collections for that great consistency. The more consistency you have across your intranet, the more likely your end users will trust you as well. Another way to support your end users and keep them at the center of your intranet is to think about how to write for them. And writing for the web is a little bit different since they're only skimming and reading that 20-ish% across the web. The writing in the inverted pyramid supports them seeing the top of the page, that most important point, and then being able to hop along to other pages if this isn't the area where they are going to get the answers for what they're looking for. So to write inverted, we want to make sure we identify our key points, put that at the top of the page as an overview, rank our secondary information, and chunk it together. Of course, all writing rules apply, writing well and concisely. Concise is specifically important in this scenario since they are reading so much less of it compared to a printed out document. Same as the labels, we want to front load those elements. So when we're creating that secondary information of content chunks, using headers can be incredibly helpful for people to support that F-shaped skimming reading pattern. And then also consider adding a summary. So maybe in the top right, someone sees the top bullets. And again, you're giving them that strong information scent of what's on this page. Do I want to keep scrolling down and keep reading because this is supporting what I need? Now, I just mentioned content chunking, and what you can actually do in a text box is create anchor links. And you can do this to support your summary in your page as well. So in a text web part, what I need to do is change my text to heading 1, 2, or 3, and that automatically will give me an anchor link. So I can use this anchor link to put into the summary if I want, or if someone asks me a very specific question, I can deliver them to the exact spot on the page where they need that answer. Again, delivering on our link promises, maybe I have a link on another site and what I want to link to is something halfway down the finance page. If they're using these headers, I can link to that exact thing. So I'm not dropping them at the top of the page and asking my end user to figure out where that information is on their site. We're always focusing on reducing that friction. So now that we've talked about our page layout and content chunking and writing our content on the pages, let's dive into some of the other web parts that we can use. And before I talk about all these web parts that I love, let's talk a little bit about visual hierarchy, because this will matter a lot for which web parts we use and how we lay them out. Visual hierarchy is the principle of arranging elements to show their order of importance. So let's explore a few different web parts and the ways they can support or distract from your visual hierarchy. Our goal is to use visual hierarchy to our advantage to support focusing the end user's attention and visual on the page on the content that supports our top tasks. Great quote from the Nielsen Norman Group that our visual hierarchy is controlling the delivery of the experience. If you have a hard time figuring out where to look on the page, it's more than likely that its layout is missing that clear visual hierarchy. So I know we have a shy audience, but I'll give you another try. How many design elements are on this page? You can list them off in chat or come off mute for anyone who is brave. It also gives me a moment to breathe in between all this content. Some of the answers I commonly hear are images, text, headers, and the one that is most commonly missed is white space. I just talked a lot about our visual scanning of pages and content chunking. White space is what supports us having separate elements. So never forget as you're designing these pages and layouts that all of that white space that Microsoft is giving us is actually to our advantage. Let's take a look at one of my favorite web parts, which is quick links, and talk about how this can support our visual hierarchy. So first I'm giving a label to my bucket of quick links. I went through a similar exercise as with my navigation, where I saw what are the resources I want to share, and together, what can I call them? And I'm keeping it a shorter list so it's easy to scan. So right now I'm setting up everyone to prepare for vacation. And I'm choosing different layouts for my quick links. Grids can give you a nice big image if that helps support your content. I don't like film strip because it hides the other items, reduces your information sent. List and button are pretty great. And we just turned on descriptions because Hawaii Vacation Planner, for example, this is a big document about all the different excursions that you can take in Hawaii. So first we want to put some images of a library. People know this is a big document with a lot of content. And now we're adding in a description. See your adventure options. And so that's providing that stronger information sent for what the Hawaii Vacation Planner is. In this situation, I didn't name it Find Your Excursions because I also wanted to deliver on my link promise that this document and this page they're going to is actually called the Hawaii Vacation Planner. The icons, again, can be really powerful in providing that visual cue of what the content is. Just be sure you're really consistent in your usage of imagery across the pages. So if I use a heart icon for HR benefits on one page, it should be the same on another page. These icons can be kind of hard to search. So one of the community members, Chris Kent, made a solution called Flycon. I've never had to say it out loud, but essentially it allows you a little bit better of a search because only one keyword brings up these items. So for example, if you type in fang body, it brings up the dog, but like no one would think of typing in fang body. So if you go to flycon.io and you type in dog, it will show you that result and it will tell you what the title should actually be within SharePoint. Continuing on, let's look at two styles of quick links next to each other. So what we see here on the left, our eye is drawn to plan your trip. It has a much heavier visual hierarchy given the size, color, and density on the page. These links to plan your trip should be more important or frequent tasks from my user needs stories than the quick links on the right for resources. In this situation, that's true. So that's a great way to use visual hierarchy to my advantage to support those user need statements. I mentioned that white space, and what white space also supports is this idea of law of common regions. If you group content together in your SharePoint pages, as humans, we interpret them as related. So because the resources are to the right of this plan your trip, I'm interpreting these are resources for planning my trip. In this situation, they are. So I'm using the law of common regions to my advantage. Just make sure you have that in mind as you're placing your content on your page. Now, we've talked a lot about providing a strong information sent. Another option to highlight your content is the call to action web part. I guess I don't have a video there, my apologies. This also has a heavier visual hierarchy due to the dark backgrounds for the call to action text and the button below. Book airfares are linked, so don't forget those link promises. I need to deliver them directly to that flight booking page, and I cannot drop them on a transit page with multiple options. The background image on this web part can also provide some better visual cues than those preset icons. As much as I love quick links, sometimes I have more to say to provide that strong information sent. So one of my favorite designs is a centered image above text. Now I have so much more space to be really specific about what that content is. And I got this design actually from the lookbook. So again, check out the lookbook and browse those pages. They do have really great ideas of how to group these different web parts together. Now, a web part I do not love so much is the hero. It forces a hierarchy of information. So in this example, we're looking at 5 tiles. If your 5 tiles are all equally important, this is saying that first tile is more important if you put it in the hero. Consider quick links in grid view if they're all equally important. Another challenge I find with the heroes, there's not a strong information sent unless you use those layers, because the layers allow you to have like a big paragraph about what's going to be on that page. And that actually can be really powerful on the home page. And you do, whether you use the tile or layers. Oh, the chat function isn't working. What a bummer. Okay, yeah, definitely unmute and interrupt me as you have questions. You do have the opportunity to use a call to action link, whether you're using those tiles or layers. So again, think of that as another opportunity to provide a stronger information sent. The hero in the full width column, I do want to warn you, especially at the top of the page, it fills the whole screen perfectly. So then there's no signifiers that someone needs to scroll to see more comments. So I don't recommend doing that full width web part at the top of the page. At the end of the day, there's lots of other beautiful web parts, and pretty pictures alone don't really make your content better. So don't lean too heavily on this, because it provides a strong impact initially when you launch your intranet and everyone says it looks so beautiful. But that will fade as people get sick of the images and they're familiar with them, and they actually just can't find the content they need. What's going to keep your adoption high long term is, again, supporting those tasks and making sure they can get their jobs done faster. As we explore these different web parts, one of the top questions I get is how to control the link behavior. A user experience best practice is to not open links on behalf of other users. If you have content they need to navigate back from, maybe consider using something like the file viewer. When you link to a document from navigation and then someone closes it, it actually drops them into the document library. So this can be really disorienting because your end user never navigated themselves to the document library. Instead, especially for communication sites, if you're making a page, maybe embed that document in the bottom of the page or link off to it in a tab. Now, scanning across all of these, we can see that the only ones that will open in a new tab are the quick links, hero, button, and call to action when there is external content. The only time you have control over where all of these links open is actually in text. At the bottom here, we can choose to open it in a new tab. Again, follow that user experience best practice, and to keep your intranet intuitive and predictable, like we were talking about earlier with the navigation, I strongly recommend mirroring the link behaviors of the other web parts. So again, you're creating that consistent experience as people are navigating different types of content across your intranet. What I just mentioned was that file viewer web part. So let's take a look at adding that into a page. Another benefit of using the file viewer web part is removing the friction for someone to have to go find another document, right? So we are putting that critical content right there. Maybe we had a news story and we are saying, here is all of the information. We just released a report. It's so interesting. Put it right there below. Someone can keep scrolling down that page and just actually read that report and dive into the information. We're trying to bridge those gaps of what we want them to do with giving them the resources to get that content done. Now I have a bit of news content I can go over, but I can absolutely skip it if we have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to pause for one moment before I dive into news to see if we have some specifics we'd rather spend our time on. Again, don't be shy in coming off mute. I will start to dive into the news, but please, please do interrupt me if you have a specific question, because I'm here for you. So looking at creating news posts, one of the things we haven't talked about so much is how we want to treat content differently based on permanence. Your dynamic content, things that are changing, updates, news, it should be pulled out and treated differently than your static content. People aren't going to know when an individual page was updated. Your end users spend more time on other websites, so matching patterns of the external world actually supports your end users navigating quickly in the intranet too. Placing dynamic content at the top of your pages ensures changes are seen. And this is what we see across all other external websites, right? Very common to have the news or some banners or some rotation carousels at the top. One of my favorite ways to capture dynamic content is SharePoint News. So I'm just going to hit play while we talk through these concepts. SharePoint News is essentially the same as a SharePoint page under the covers. It just has a promoted state that allows me to filter it into a news web part. So let's take a look at posting this news. Again, this is going to be 3 minutes about of making news for illustration purposes only, clicking through and using our different web parts. And I'm implementing the different things I've talked about so far in this talk, like using headers, doing content chunking, and actually implementing my law of common regions to have related information next to each other. You would likely spend more time than these 3 minutes, something proportional to the importance of your content to get it looking the way that you would like it. Again, at the end of the day, we're talking about that aesthetic usability principle, that users often perceive something aesthetically pleasing design as design that's more usable. SharePoint provides a really beautiful canvas to help us create this engaging news and put all of the content in context on the page. So for example, right now I'm adding in on the left, we're talking about a new excursion in Mexico City, Bazaar Sabado, and we are putting the map of where it is. And next to the map, if someone's going there, they also want to know the time that they can go there. So using that law of common regions, putting them together. Because this is very much about going and buying souvenirs from your trip, this is an opportunity where images will really support people getting excited and engaged with the content because they want to see what they can go buy and bring home from this excursion. Do be careful with your images. Don't add them if someone cannot understand what they are 5 seconds out of context. You're adding to someone's cognitive load if you put a lot of images on there that don't immediately and intuitively connect to your content. So here we just made this whole big page, added all of this content. Last thing I'm going to do at the bottom is drop in a little bit of the history of Bazaar Sabado. Again, it's supporting that inverted pyramid. where at the top we're saying this is what Bizarre Sabado is. We're getting more refined in our secondary information. And the least important piece of information we have is the history of it, because that's not what's going to be helping someone decide where they want to go. One thing I didn't call out, but I'm showing right now, is page headers. You can add images into your page headers as well. So this is a great replacement if what you're talking about doesn't actually have a ton of images that fit it well to support it, but you don't want to just have a black and white page. You can have a very rich page image in your header that does bring some of that pop and color and interest. And it's especially important for news stories because you get a page thumbnail, which you can change. So if I change that thumbnail to be something a little bit more related to Bizarre Sabado, we're adding in our actual icon of the market. So when they go there, they're going to be connecting that signage they've seen before. And that's what shows in our news web part roll-up. You can leverage your existing content and turn it into news. So while we're talking right now, you're realizing, oh no, I have a lot of dynamic content and I'm just treating it like a page. All you have to do is post your page as news. So promote it as news and then add a web part to your homepage and it'll start rolling up all of those pieces of news. You can also bring this news to where your end users are by emailing them, which I just demoed. So bring that news into their inbox and deliver it to them. Last but not least, you can also bring external content in. So anytime where we're supporting our end users, we're trying to balance all of these different resources and places they want to go. The more you can bring into your intranet, the easier you make it for them to have it be a one-stop shop of all of their content. So what you can do is create what's called a news link. So in this situation, again, it's a travel site. We're talking about Mexico City. I'm going to go to the internet, grab this news article, and all I have to do is hit add news link. It's going to add it into that same web part. It's going to give it that same look and feel. It automatically pulls the picture, title, and description from the news article. I can even reframe the description to explain to my colleagues why this exact article is relevant to them and put it into better context. And then when I post it onto my site, it's going to look the same as all of that other news. Again, my end users don't care if the news is from internal or external. They just know that it's important to them and they want to know what they have to stay up to date on. You can also create news digests, so you can make a whole summary of all of these different news pages to, again, meet them in their inbox. I'm going to go over this really quickly because I know we're right at time. But essentially what you can do is pick your top stories. Allow you to do is send all of these stories in a group to your end users. But on the back end, you're also getting to create a SharePoint page. And what's great about that is you're capturing that moment in time instead of relying on people's inboxes to be another source of information. So another great way to embed that excellent user experience in your out-of-the-box solutions is to create a centralized repository of all information and bring everything that you want your end users to see into one spot. You can forward it to yourself and customize it as well, so you can delete out things like the Microsoft and SharePoint logos. You can also choose to tag one site as declarative news. So if you want to have that traditional company news, this is the must read. You'll see travel was declared that declarative news, and so it has a different bit of a treatment of the visual in that roll up. I don't have a lot of time to talk about the evolution of news or what to communicate where and when. So I highly recommend checking out these two articles on Microsoft Community Docs about the evolution of news from email to SharePoint, and then also deciding where your org-wide communication should be, whether it's Teams, Yammer, or SharePoint News. Now, I know that was a ton of information about how to keep everybody at the center of our intranet, focusing on what our end users need to get their jobs done and keeping those top tasks in front of mind as we're working with all these different web parts, considering some of these user experience best practices for how to write for the web and support their natural behaviors. We also have a lot coming up in that was announced at Ignite, and we have the roadmap showing right now. So things I had mentioned, that home site, that app bar, and the home site app coming in Teams, that should be Q1 2021. SharePoint News is going to have a lot of new features added, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'm so excited for it. We're also going to get some new web parts like an org chart, which people ask for, and you're going to be able to do some scheduling for pages and news. I talked a lot about reducing cognitive load. They're adding audience targeting, not only in navigation, which we have now, it's going to be on those events and quick links web parts as well. So again, if it doesn't apply to someone, don't show it to someone. You want to reduce that cognitive load. Thank you all for bearing with me through my lightning fast hour of UX in our out-of-the-box solutions. Here's a page of resources of all of the different articles that I was referencing throughout that whole talk. I'll pause for any questions, but most of all, just thank you all for being here, and please don't hesitate to speak up now if you will have any specific questions about everything we went over today.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This was really useful. We are right in the middle of migrating over to Office 365, specifically our intranet. So this was all excellent information that's really going to be helpful.
Awesome. So glad to hear it. Don't hesitate to reach out to me on Twitter or anything as you're on that journey. I've been there myself before, so I have a lot of appreciation. You have a big road ahead of you, but I think you'll find a lot of these new modern interfaces to be absolutely worth the effort.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments? Volunteer to speak next month. Well, Emily, I really appreciate you doing this and volunteering your knowledge. It was very beneficial to people that are creating intranets and like you. And I know from my perspective, this is going to be very helpful when we finally decide to migrate into a modern environment. My company's still on SharePoint 2013, so
I look forward to that day for you and your colleagues.
I know,
for sure.
me too. But anyway, I'm just going to share my screen again, just to say we need speakers. I don't know how much more I can ask and beg, but do volunteer to speak for 2021. And I guess that's all I have. So Emily, again, thank you very much. And everybody, thank you for attending. And like I said, I will have the recordings, and I took a screenshot of the links that Emily posted at the last slide. And so I'll put that also on our user group website, along with the post where the video is at. So thank you again. Hopefully we'll see you. Have a great end of the year, and hopefully we'll see you in January.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Great.